Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Goolsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
I thought you were kidding. I didn't really think you were going to start it that way.
I like that you were looking away so you didn't know it was coming. Well, I am by no means an expert on this thing. I know that. And that wasn't the point.
Yeah.
I've been trying to learn, and what spawned me to do that is that I was gifted this wing bone call.
That's so
special. It was made by Lovett Williams. This was number 16, called the Hermit. And the reason it's relevant today is because we were going to do an episode to talk about what is actually going on behaviorally at the turkey's nest. And when I started digging around, man, Lovett has such great information in his book on this. I thought, why don't we just focus on what he said?
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the guys that pioneered turkey research and, you know, the stuff from Florida.
Right.
So this is the book that I am checking out right here.
Yeah. The thing that I love about this stuff too is obviously our bread and butter is going into studies and doing deep dives and all that kind of stuff. And y'all have heard us, you know, on dozens of episodes talk about all these statistics and averages and, you know, everything like that. But sometimes it's fun. Yeah. But sometimes, like with Lovett stuff, it's fun just to listen to natural history.
Yeah.
You know, and he just went out and watched them and recorded what they did. And that's fun to talk about too.
Yeah.
Just like reading Illumination in the Flatwoods, you know, it's a story. It's not science, but it still provides insight and it still has value.
Yeah. Well, it was scientific in some respects. Like he had deliberate measurements that he's making, and it was structured. And, you know, we had his daughter on to talk some about it and give us that insight. But, you know, he wrote a lot about turkeys. And I think it's fun to go back and read some of that stuff, especially since I'm working right nearby some of these study areas that I use so much, like Fishing Creek. You know, it's right between two of our major research sites. So I have dug around quite a bit in some of his old literature, and I knew about this chapter and remembered going through it previously when we started talking about this. You know, we've done 3 or 4 episodes and videos that are separated from that are on YouTube about nesting and nesting cover, nest site selection, and all that sort of stuff here recently. And it dawned on me it'd be really cool to just talk about, well, what's actually going on at the nest. I'm talking about after the nest site has been selected, just behaviorally from the hen's perspective, and even from, you know, we could take it all the way to young poults that are still at the nest site if you want to. But Lovett had some really special data where
just like what's she doing while she's there?
Yeah.
Like, you know, all the studies describe when she goes there and where she goes and all that, but none of them really address that point of what is she doing.
Yeah, like let's just say let's get a view into the life of a hen for you know, a few minutes. So I wanted to start with this. I highlighted this remark that he had in the book. The first radio tracking turkey nesting study was initiated in Florida in 1966.
Okay.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So, based on the radio tracking data, and he also had raised some turkeys, and I know when we had his daughter on, she talked a little bit about that. And I'm not real clear on how much of this information is coming from hens that that he knew
Yeah.
versus radio tracking. And you might see what I'm talking about here in a little while when I go through some of this stuff, but nonetheless, he's got some pretty remarkable information that he's observed. So just to kind of give you an idea of how he was getting that information, uh, he talked about using the radio tracking, and after the location of a nesting hen is discovered, an observational blind can be erected within about 30 feet of the nest,
Oh,
10 yards away.
that's got to be semi-tame.
Well, that's what I'm wondering about,
Yeah.
but he didn't really clearly indicate one way or another in here. But he did have a picture of the blind, so we'll cut that in on YouTube.
Was it Bottomland?
No, it wasn't bottomland. It's kind of ridiculous, honestly. But I just, I love looking back at what these folks were doing.
Yeah.
And that guy had to love some turkeys
Yeah.
because he's trying to put up a blind 10 yards from a hen nesting so that he can sit there literally all day long and watch what she does all day.
How does he get in there without disturbing her?
I guess he's going in there before daylight. I don't know.
It's when she's laying, or
Yeah,
when she's
he
or
did
did he continue
actually.
through incubation too?
No, he continued on.
So he just snuck in there in the
So
dark
for 28 days, this dude that's dedication.
all
You
day,
know,
all day for 28 days.
I guess so. He doesn't make it real clear, but listen to the information that he's articulating that he got from this.
And that's well, just so people fully appreciate this. This is in April in
Yeah,
South Florida.
yeah.
So
Not far from Lake Okeechobee. I'll
what
give
are
you
we
some
talking
idea.
about? Average temp and humidity? You think?
Oh, it's 90s for sure. It's terrible on both.
That was a hard man,
Yeah,
and not even talking about the bugs. You know?
yeah. I'm gonna tell you what, we're sitting in a blind in January trying to catch turkeys and it's hot.
Yeah,
You know, like
that was a
yeah.
hard joker.
Oh yeah. I'm sure there's somewhere that he wrote about some of that stuff, and I think that he did write a couple of the questions that you had interlaid there in that discussion. I read it somewhere, but it's not in the text I'm looking at right now about some of those factors, like
Hmm.
when is it getting in and out of the blind
Yeah,
and that kind of stuff,
yeah.
but it's not in here. So, look, all right, so now we found the nest, right? Here's another reason that I think that some of this is coming from relatively tame hens. And, he may have been raising them and then they're kind of wild, but kind of,
Yeah.
you know, he said in the mid morning of the day of the first egg is to be laid, the hen begins to move toward the nesting area.
Yeah, so he was with her from the get-go.
Yeah, because and the reason we're both keying in on that, it is incredibly difficult to detect a hen during laying at all with VHF technology.
Mhm.
When we get really sure about it is when they spend the night on the nest the first time,
Mhm.
which would be the incubation phase.
Mhm.
Then it's pretty obvious, if you go out and the hen's on the nest, she's either dead or, she's on the nest. So it's a little easier from that perspective. But with the technology he was using, I don't know how he would find the first egg.
Yeah.
So he goes on to say it, but describe basically exactly what she's doing step by step almost,
That's
which I think
fun.
is just
Yeah.
phenomenal to read about. So when she arrives in the general vicinity, it's usually about noon. It's just during the middle of the day. She doesn't waste any time picking a place. She scratches out a shallow spot on the ground and lays her first egg while she's still standing.
Okay.
So, was there anything that stuck out to you right there?
While she's still standing.
Yeah, that was interesting. Like, why
Yeah.
do you feel it necessary to act that? And then I'm viewing it. It's like, did she just literally just drop an egg like 6, 8 inches? What if it cracks or something? You know,
Well, that's why
like
she scratched out the ground first, I guess, to make sure there
yeah,
weren't any rocks underneath it that it could crack
I
on.
guess so. Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting. She just doesn't waste any time. She just goes in there and scratches out a little spot and then lays the egg down.
Yeah.
And apparently leaves pretty quickly after that. But she, after laying on the bare soil, she lingers for a few minutes. She puts a few dry leaves on top of the egg, and then she leaves for the day.
Yeah.
She doesn't sit on the egg at all that day.
Which is that part was surprising to me. So you read some of this to me when you first went through it. I don't know, was it about a year ago, maybe?
Yes,
For the
I,
first
I did
time.
a series on this of videos. So
Yeah,
if people want to kind of watch
maybe
through and
that's what I'm
see
thinking about.
figures
Yeah,
and things, yeah, when I originally was reading it, I think it was last turkey season, so it was probably a year ago.
yeah.
But we can link those if people want to see that. But
But up until you read me that, I was always under the impression that she didn't cover the. They did. She never tried to cover the eggs
he
or attempt to
repeatedly talks about that. So
camouflage them. So that was surprising to me.
yeah, so she's covering up with leaves, and some folks may be familiar. I have a nest, a simulated nest study that's evaluating fire return interval, and I posted the year one, the process of setting that up, and
Hmm.
the preliminary results from that year and all that. It still has 2 more years before we'll do anything really with it, but we were trying to simulate laying. So I was putting 4 eggs in the nest and putting leaves over it. So, we can link a couple of those if people want to look at what that looks like. We were trying to simulate as best as we could understand of what Lovett was describing they do. So that'll give you some visuals. He also talks about she forages fairly close by, within a mile, but she usually does not visit the next day.
Hmm.
So she lays egg number one, and then on day two, she hangs out nearby, like within a mile, what he specifically said, but doesn't come back to the nest site. So, in other words, she skips the second day.
I thought it was an egg a day.
Well, it is a little later on. Said on the third day, the first day's behavior is repeated. So she lays that second egg, she covers them with leaves before she leaves, and she doesn't stick around that long. After the second egg, some hens will skip another day before laying becomes a daily event,
Okay.
but they might, it may, after egg number two, or uh, yeah, after egg number two, some hens start at daily laying an egg, and some hens skip a second one.
I'm interested. Have you ever gone back retrospectively through your hen data to see if you can pick up on this pattern? So
We
once
have
you've
been
identified a nest, can you find like on day one did she go there and then she skipped a day and came back?
we have been going through all of that, and we are developing some methods to identify nests all the way to hopefully potentially day one. But we have a very good idea when a lot of nests started because you can
Sure.
retrospectively backdate it, and we do see it. Yeah,
Okay.
I would say it's, we don't know if that's actually what we're seeing, but this pattern would fit it, what it looks like on the data, I would say.
Okay.
Not always, but it does seem to be present sometimes. But after that third egg is laid, almost all hens lay every day. But he still left a little room for
Yeah.
variation in there even then. The nest I thought this was interesting. The nest is getting built over time because every time she leaves and has placed a new egg, she puts more debris on top. And he made a note that the debris kind of every day when she comes back and does her little thing, it kind of starts settling to the bottom. So you end up building a nest essentially from that gradual accumulation of debris and stuff she's putting on it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So laying is usually a few minutes later each day, and more time is spent at the nest. By the sixth or seventh egg laid, the hens start, most of the hens start to stay at the nest for 2 or 3 hours,
Mhm.
which is probably that early incubation, behavior before they really
Yeah.
start incubating heavily. And that gets later and later. He actually has some really cool tables in here where he is basically giving you the laying sequence of a juvenile. Let's see, that's another juvenile hen and an adult hen. So he's gave 3 tables that gave the laying sequence. So if you want to, we can go through those. But I kind of found it interesting that they ramp up pretty quickly to where they're spending a lot of time at the nest
Yeah.
and generally in the afternoon. You want to? I can run through these real quick if you want to do these laying sequences, and we can put these tables up for folks that are watching. So this was a juvenile hen. She arrived, let's see, on the day that the first egg was laid. She arrived at 11:50 a.m. She left the nest at 12:25. Did not visit on the second day.
That means he sat there in the blind by himself all day.
The third day, she arrived sometime between 6:30 and 8 a.m. So I guess that may be an indicator that he wasn't in the blind until 8.
Ah,
But she had already been there.
she caught him sleeping.
Maybe so. You know what? That would be hilarious if he missed it because he was in there sleeping. So that was, the third day that the nest has been established, but the second egg was laid. He didn't put the leaving time either. Maybe he wasn't in the blind. I don't know. On the next day, there wasn't an egg laid, but she visited it
Interesting.
2:25 p.m. and then left at 3 p.m. And then on day 5, she laid her third egg. She arrived at 10:40 a.m. and left at 11:33. So 53 minutes at the nest.
Yeah,
Dang.
it
On
almost
the After the third day, she did not visit the nest all day.
you know what this makes me think of is that this seems like an anti-predation strategy.
I thought the exact
It's
same thing,
it's
man.
almost like she's
It's like she's
prospecting, she's dipping her toe in the water, she's like, "Alright, I'll
yeah,
do
she's
1 egg,"
sampling. Yeah,
and she goes back a little bit later, and it's like,
checks
"Oh,
it
okay,
out.
egg 1 is still there, I'll go ahead and put another one in."
Yeah, because she is coming back and inspecting things to see. Like she came one day and didn't lay an egg, but she was checking it out. But again, this is a juvenile hen, so you know. And also, there apparently is a lot of individual variation.
So is this the only hen that he has observations to this level of detail for?
No, there he has 3 that
Okay.
he put in this book.
Were they all Jennies, or were some of them adults
Two
too?
Jennies and 1 adult.
Did the adult kinda follow that same pattern, you think?
Oh, and then he has another table that has 8 hens in it. There's not as much detail, but it's got a bunch of information about how frequently. So, what was that question?
Well, I just wondered if you could see that sampling, as you called it, pattern in the adult hen laying behavior.
Yeah, I'll go to that one next.
Because one thing that makes me think about is, especially if she's laying an egg and then not laying another egg until 2 days later, I mean, it's already hard enough to pick up on when they initiate their nest using GPS data. And if they're skipping days on top of that, then it makes me wonder, like, how many of these early nest losses do we potentially miss? Like, she just went and laid 1 or 2 eggs, and then it was discovered by a predator, and so she
Yeah,
left.
I would say that that really seems to be the strategy. And even Lovett said it. Almost all hens skip the second day, and a lot of them skip the day after the second egg is left.
Right. So we would miss almost all those.
Yeah, even with the GPS technology. So yeah, she had 3 days during that sequence that she didn't lay an egg, and 2 of the days she did not even visit. So by the fourth egg being laid, she's there for 30 minutes. She got there at 7:50. 35 minutes the next day, she laid a fifth egg, 10:35. By So that was 35 minutes. By the seventh egg, she's there for 215 minutes. Then the eighth was 290, ninth, 446. All of
Wow.
them around the middle of the day when she arrived. Latest being 140 when she ended up incubating.
Yeah, so I mean, that's almost 7.5 hours. You said
Yeah.
she spent 446 minutes there.
Yeah, that was the
I was
day
trying
before she initiated incubation.
Yeah, that makes sense. But she was spending a couple hours a day, 2 or 3 hours a day, a good bit before that, several days before that.
Yeah, the seventh and eighth egg, she was there 215 and 290. So, and it's weird, like it's an anecdote, but it's also like it's pretty wild that that he collected that data.
I'm trying to remember, there's another paper or it was a book chapter that I cited recently in a paper that I wrote, talking about this behavior and how hens start spending an increasing amount of time at the nest as they get
Yeah,
further on in laying. And there was, I sent the paper around for all the other co-authors to look at it and work on it. And there was another co-author that said, "Oh no, this doesn't happen. They don't start incubating until they're all laid." And I remembered, I went back to that citation that I'd included there, and that was another one that was separate from what Lovett. So there's two sources that have reported that they do in
yeah.
fact do that, but it seems
There's
to be
another one too.
a very obscure knowledge that most people have never
Hmm.
come across before.
Yeah, the postdoc that I had working on the Polt imprinting project found another document from one of the old time researchers
Yeah,
where they initiate incubation for a couple hours
yeah.
before they incubate overnight.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, yeah, really, really good stuff. I'll run through this one real fast because I don't want us to spend an hour going through these sequences, but I do find it interesting. This is another Jenny. He didn't find her until the second egg was laid, so we might have missed those
Yeah,
day in between things. But she got there at 9:10 on the day that the second egg was laid and was there 80 minutes. Then 9:45 the next day was 3. It was 150 minutes. Then 10:30 the next day, 60 minutes. 10:15 the following day. She's laying an egg in each of these. 40 minutes. 9:44, 46 minutes. And then on the sixth egg, let's see, no, the seventh egg again, we went from that 45 minutes to an hour to 205 minutes, then 215, then 372. And then after the ninth egg was laid, she got there at 9:35, and then she stayed there through the night incubating that on that.
I'm just thinking of walking a mile in that hen's shoes, and that day that they pull up to the nest and they know that it's time to sit for a month. It's just like
Yeah,
they got to be breathing a big sigh,
yeah,
like here
it's
we
ready to
go.
go.
It's like I'm
Here
about
we
to
are.
sleep on the ground for a month straight.
Yeah. Okay, so here's an adult hen. Essentially, she's visiting the nest most of the time between 10 and 11. That's when she's getting there.
Hmm.
The second egg being laid, which was the first one he documented, she got there at 2:45 that day. So she had already laid an egg before he detected it, but she did not visit it all day the next day
Yeah,
after the second egg. So presumably, and I suspect he probably missed the nest because when she laid the first egg, she didn't come back the next day.
yeah,
So anyway, she didn't miss a day after that. She laid 11 eggs, and same pattern. When we got to day 7, we went from averaging about a half hour at the nest every day to 354 minutes
Yeah.
on the 7th day. And it was over 300 and up in almost 500 by the 11th egg. And then she just abandoned the nest. She never started incubating.
Well, that's gotta be, when you start spending especially over 300 minutes at the nest on a daily basis, that should be pretty easily observable in a GPS track. But
Yeah,
I don't remember seeing anybody publish on that using their GPS tracks about how much time they spend there.
yeah. We're
So
working on
I
that right
wonder if that's
now.
just like an omission that, we've just never thought about
Yeah.
publishing, or if it's something that
What also
maybe
makes it
maybe
makes a
some
lot of
researchers
sense.
have documented it and they just assume that it just took her a long time to lay the egg that particular day.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It is really interesting to me that on average, when you go and look at when people are finding the nests, it's usually around day 6 or 7 in laying when they're on average
So that would
finding the
make
nest.
sense given that
Mm,
observation story that you just went through, because that was
yeah.
when she started spending a lot of time there.
Well, and look at this. Like, how much? 496 minutes. How many hours is that?
I gotta change it over from Alabama's to ours.
It's not quite
You
10,
didn't get
right?
my
So it's
joke.
like 8.5.
It's 8.3. Yeah, 8.26.
So she spent 8.5 hours after she laid her 11th egg and then left. And then the next day she came in and spent 8 hours at it, didn't lay an egg, and then just abandoned it for no
Oh,
apparent reason.
wow.
For no apparent reason. He,
Wow.
he couldn't determine why.
Huh. Maybe it was this blind that was 30 feet away.
Yeah, but she said
I know, I know.
she had 4 consecutive days that she spent 8 hours there.
Yeah,
And then she's like, you know what? I'm good.
yeah. We can speculate all day, but we'll never really know the why to questions like that, I don't think.
Yeah. So,
It could have been she just decided that she didn't have the resources to sit that nest this year, you
yeah,
know?
just yeah. I don't know if I'm in this all night. 8 hours is really rough. I agree. It's tough. I know Lovett's in there. He's done eating all of his damn uh, beef jerky and stuff he brought.
Bananas.
Everybody, he's gone. He had a can of sardines in there.
Surely he packed, like, a cooler with something cold to drink in there. I mean, I couldn't imagine sitting there that long and not having something cold.
Yeah, he probably needed about 2 gallons of water to sit there like that. Here's something that's interesting. He said occasionally hens will lay eggs outside the nest. One of the ones that he was watching closely, the hen laid 4 eggs in a 30-foot wide area before she picked an area to nest in and then started nesting.
Decoy eggs.
How many times I've definitely been sent this a bunch of times, and I have found a couple of random eggs laying
I
around,
know,
and
yeah.
I'm always like, oh man, a coyote pulled that, grabbed that, and
I'll have people send me pictures too of, like, single eggs just laying in the most random place.
yeah. One of them, somebody, when I did a video on this last year, somebody sent me an image of an egg sitting in the middle of a road.
Yeah.
Like she just laid it in the gravel.
She was just trying to give Lovett some more eggs to put some strychnine in.
Yeah.
You didn't get that reference, did you?
No, when he was putting the
When he
strychnine eggs
when
all
he did
around
the
him.
poison egg study, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. He had the one study, but I don't know if that wasn't just more common than that when he was doing stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a couple of references where he mentions that. I don't know if
Oh,
I told you that.
yes, you did, I remember that now.
So I start to see some of these high nest success things, and it's like, well,
72%.
yeah, he had a wall of
Strychnine.
strychnine eggs all around her. Uh, but I thought that was amazing. One of this hen that he I guess he was sitting in a blind and she laid 4 eggs. And I assumed that she came back every day and just like put an egg in a new place each time.
Well, another plausible explanation is we always think of turkeys as all kind of being the same and, knowing what they need to do to survive and all that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I mean, just like people, there's got to be some dumb turkeys too.
Oh yeah.
Like
Well,
maybe that one
we
just
talk.
got hit in the head as a poult.
Well, we hear people talk about the super hen.
Yeah.
Well, it may just be that the hen lays all her eggs in one spot. You know, like this hen clearly didn't know what was going on. She laid eggs in 4
Well, and
different places,
if there's going to be a
but
super hen by default, there has to be another hen on the opposite end of that
yeah,
extreme, right?
yeah, you can't be a super hen unless somebody's not.
Got the super hen and the duper hen.
Get this though, she successfully hatched her brood. The one that laid 4 rando eggs.
But the 4 rando eggs, of course, did not hatch.
Well, he didn't say anything about it, but she successfully hatched the clutch. He did say that she finally incubated, so I'd assume just what she incubated.
But the other thing you have to think about is by the end of those 28 days, the viable eggs that she's incubating are one thing, but then those decoy eggs that she laid out there had to be stinking to high heavens by that
Yeah,
point, you know?
they're
It's like
rotten.
drawing in everything under the sun. Like, I mean,
Oh man,
you,
imagine he
you know,
didn't say anything about where that was at, but in Florida, those eggs were hot.
you had to think every possum within the county had to know where that nest was.
Good Lord. Can you imagine this? Those eggs had been 102 degrees for like a week in
Have you
Oh
ever,
man.
I mean, surely you've read Charlotte's Web, right? At some point in the
Yeah.
past, but it's probably been
Yeah.
a long time. Well, we read it with my daughter not that long ago, and you remember there's the section in there where the rat gets
Yeah. Yeah.
the bad egg, the unfertilized egg from the geese,
Yeah. He just loves it.
and then he breaks it and it smells up the whole farmyard. That's kind of what a situation I'm picturing here.
Yeah. Maybe that was a strategy, is concealing her scent, you know? Maybe those are the super hens, the ones that can conceal their scent effectively. He said a normal clutch course is an average of 11, but in literature that's really commonly 10, I think. But
Mhm.
he, in his studies, saw anywhere from 6 to 17 eggs. And I think I heard Mike Chamberlain at the convention say they had a nest that they had 18 in.
Yeah.
You remember that? We've had one
Well, I
with
know there's been
in the teams.
some of that recent work where they're starting to show more and more dumping by
Mhm.
hens in other hens'
Yeah,
nests, so that might
there's
be
definitely a lot of nest dumping.
yeah.
Hell, this hen can't even hit her own nest. Maybe that's the strategy. All the nest dumping is going to these rando eggs.
She just needs to recalibrate her GPS.
She got lost. All right, let's move on. So I found this pretty remarkable. We're talking about how hard this is on the ham,
Mhm.
and we were talking about that when it was only 8 hours. He documented hens in some cases sitting continuously without leaving the nest for as long as 3 days.
That makes me sick.
Think about the body condition she has to be in to do that.
I mean, in South Florida,
Yes.
I think if I sat in one spot for 3 days that time of year in South Florida, I'd probably be dead. Not just miserable, but, like, actually dead.
I mean,
3
that's like, surely she's like reaching around and grabbing some grasshoppers or something, like,
3 days without water in
yeah.
South Florida.
He also made I don't remember if it's in this text or not, but he was talking about the defecation.
Yeah.
I don't remember where it was at, but it was like these massive, uh, like I don't know, like egg-sized slams that they were accumulating. Come on, I need to give Charlotte a gobble here. Like they've got this massive
Is
so
it
like
really? Did he measure him?
he, I don't know if he measured them, but he definitely talks about it. I don't know if it's in this book or one of his other writings.
Oh man, how did you not highlight that?
Well, I'm looking around to see. I, surely I would have highlighted that. I don't see it right now.
Well, you can imagine, especially if it's been 3 days since she took a recess.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
gonna be
not. I'm not seeing it. If I find that reference, I'll cut it in or get Charlotte to cut it in. But I can't. I don't see it right now. I mean that if there's advantage to sitting on the nest that day, I can see why being in better body condition could convey higher nesting success. If they need to be able to sit there
no doubt.
without doing anything for that long, I mean,
I think it's hard to argue that it wouldn't be the case that the longer they sit and the less they move around, the better shape they're in.
yeah,
Because the scent's all already there, right?
yeah.
So, you know, walking around does it draws eyes, it draws ears, and then you're putting scent out that leads a trail
Well,
down a
the
trail
other
back to your
thing,
nest.
listen listen to this and tell me that wouldn't convey a benefit because otherwise, why would she go through all this trouble? When departing from and returning to their nest to lay or during the incubation period, hens may fly or walk. In flying from the nest, the hen stands and spring almost directly from the nest. In returning, she normally lands a few feet away and then walks the remaining distance. She doesn't want to walk
That is
near the nest.
amazing. That is amazing.
She's flying away and flying back in, and I'm taking that as don't leave a scent trail back to your nest.
Absolutely. I don't know another way to
So
interpret it.
sitting on the nest for a long time, I could see where that could be pretty important because you don't have to risk all that noise and scent. So I could definitely see that.
That is super interesting. I've never heard anybody talk about that before.
I haven't either, but it kind of makes me feel like being in good body condition so you don't have to leave so much is a good idea.
It also makes me think that having enough vegetation to hide you in your nest, but making sure it's not so thick that you can't do that, fly in and fly out, makes a lot of sense too.
Yes, we're going to get into that here directly. Not today, but soon. But this one related to that is going to mess you up a little bit, I think.
All right.
She will not flush unless attacked by a predator, and if the nest is in good cover, she will not flinch when a man walks as near as 8 feet. When nests are not concealed by vegetation, disturbed hens will flush at greater distances. In such situations, a significant number of nests may be lost if human activity is frequent, as in some parks or other public properties.
Mhm.
So if they're nesting in poor nesting cover,
They're more likely to abandon.
they will be flushed at much greater distances. And he wrote the actual amount somewhere. I'm not seeing it at the moment, but I think he was saying that she will not flinch when they get as close as 8 feet, but I'm pretty sure. Now, don't quote me on this because I'm not seeing the actual number they wrote in here at the moment, but he has it. He said that they would not allow people to get within 30 feet or 30 something feet when the nest is exposed.
Yeah.
Just think about that.
Yeah.
That vegetation cover, and it doesn't have to be a human, they were just able to observe it there.
Yeah.
But imagine you're a hen in the woods and you're in wide open and you're flushing from predators that get within a certain distance, and that distance is now 3 or 4 times as far
Yeah.
that you're having to flush from.
Yeah.
That is a huge difference in terms of how likely you are to get flushed by a predator or a person.
Yeah.
Somebody's walking around in the
The
woods.
other thing I think about too is if you're in an area that, I mean, which most areas have poor nesting cover, right? And so, if you're in an area that has that combined with um, the most intensive hunting pressure of the spring season that is concentrated around that nesting period, then that's kind of a scary combination to have.
Mhm.
I mean, the nest success is already down because you've got poor nesting cover, so it's more likely to be discovered by a predator. But on top of that, then she's more likely to flush from further if a hunter accidentally walks up on her
Yeah, or a predator.
or a predator.
Yep. So get your nesting cover right. We got a video to show you how to measure it, and we got tons of videos showing you how to make it.
Yeah,
So,
get
yeah,
after it.
I wasn't even thinking about that part.
Yeah,
Man, when I read that, I just got chills because I was like, man, think about how many places are in poor nesting cover. And I didn't think about, I've been thinking about her being more detectable, but I've not thought about her abandoning faster because of she knows she's not concealed.
yeah. I never thought
Like
about that either.
she's getting out of there. So one thing he noted that I highlighted is she is not covering the incubated eggs with leaves when she leaves.
When she recesses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's more typical probably of what you were
right.
thinking about.
Yeah. So it makes me wonder if when she puts that debris on the eggs early on, is she really trying to cover them, or is she just like making those daily contributions to building the nest bowl? It's hard to know
Yeah,
what purpose that serves.
right. Yeah, you don't know if she's actually trying to hide the eggs or just trying to build a nest.
Yeah.
And it's probably serving both purposes, so it's, you know, an evolved behavior. In a few cases, so we were talking about the old rando hen.
The old rando.
Sometimes they'll put eggs back in their nest if they roll out of it or they lay one outside of it.
Yeah. Well, that's
They'll
nice of
roll
them.
it over there.
That's nice of them to do that.
Oh man. Yeah, so now we're kind of to the end of that 28 day, which he said it's rarely 28 days in the wild. That what he said is probably coming from incubation, like
Mm.
incubators, artificial,
Mhm.
which is really typically 28 days.
Mhm.
But he observed it as little as 25 days, and rarely did it go 28.
Hmm.
That's what he wrote.
Interesting.
There's a couple of other things that are interesting. So when, everybody knows when they're in the egg, there's yolk,
Mhm.
right? That's feeding this, I guess, fetus at that point, or the embryo. Once right before hatching, that's still present, and there's some yolk apparently available in the body cavity of the poult. And after the poult hatches, that is enough energy supply for about 2 days
Yeah.
until the digestive system is functioning and the poult begins
Yeah.
feeding.
That also makes sense because oftentimes they move a fair amount from the nest to their brooding grounds. So they got to have some energy to get them there.
Yeah. Although there's some other interesting things. It's really important for them to be synchronous,
Mhm.
right? So there's a couple of things going on. Folks that have read Illumination of Flatwoods have probably heard about this,
Yeah,
but
I think it's so cool.
when you get a couple of days out from hatching, poults begin to make noises and vibrations inside the egg.
Mhm.
He said on the 24th day is when he saw this happening. And that stimulates the other poults to speed up the hatching process, and the hen will begin to cluck to the hatching poults.
That's so cool.
I'm gonna kind of skip some of this stuff about the egg tooth and how they open their egg like a can opener. Essentially,
Yeah,
that's what this next paragraph's up.
yeah,
But when I was talking about the synchrony, this is the quote that I highlighted that made me think, man, synchrony is pretty dang important.
mhm,
If that stretched over 3 or 4 days, you think about how fast these little guys are growing. He said that when the last eggs are hatching, the first poults are already a day old or even a little older, and they're becoming really restless. They're
yeah,
already jumping around, catching flies and ants, and calling to each other and to the brooding hen. And during that whole process, that's when they're imprinting on the
right,
parent.
right.
But you just think about we stretch that over 2 days, and those poults that hatched 2 days ago are probably near double the size of the one that's still
Yeah,
in the egg.
yeah.
And you're almost doubling it every day.
What
The
was
growth.
that what was that statistic I shared at the workshop last weekend? They
It
increased
was
their body
something.
weight like 60 something fold over the first
Yeah.
4 months of life.
Well, you put it into context,
Well,
which I thought
yes,
was
I
really
remember
funny.
the context. It would be like a 7-pound newborn human growing to 500 pounds in 4 months. That's how fast they grow.
Yeah. 500.
I think it was actually 476 pounds, but yeah, close enough. Well, that's super cool.
I guess here directly. Oh, I found the defecation quote.
I love I love how excited he is. If y'all are listening to audio only version, his eyes just lit up.
I just found it. So they will basically be ground roosting, is what he's saying, for nearly 2 weeks until they can roost in a tree at night.
Mhm.
During the time that the brood roosts on the ground, the hen. Actually, this is actually not related to the nest. I think he has that somewhere else. But the hen does not defecate at night, but holds it until moving off the roost spot the next morning. Droppings are nearly 10 times the normal size. All right, let's think about this for a second.
I don't know where you're going with this.
Well, I'm thinking about 10 times the size. So we got, a little, everybody knows what a
Little hen
turkey
scat.
turd looks
Yeah.
like. 10 times that. We're starting to get on up there about egg size, I'm saying.
But he never
But that's after
specified
one night.
but he never specified if it was 10 times length or diameter.
I was thinking about it just being mashed. You know,
Just like
they're just kind of
volume.
mashed up. I feel like it's just like stopping in the track,
Yeah.
and it's sort of down there in the end.
We just lost a bunch of our listeners.
Yeah, well, you know what? They weren't dedicated.
They weren't not defecated.
Defecated? You could see how I could have a Freudian slip right there. So then, the other scat just keeps on coming down, so I kind of feel like it's just smashing up into a ball. Yeah, 10 times the normal size, but that's just over one night. And we got hens over there staying on the nest for 3 days.
Yeah, but she's also not eating anything when she's incubating, right?
That's true. It's a good point. Solid point.
Yeah.
But she got a bunch of stuff in her digestive tract,
Yeah.
I'm guessing. Anyway, I'm glad I found the poop joke. But he did say poults can often fly at 7 days of age,
Yeah.
but they'll continue to roost on the ground until they're 13 to 17 days old, generally.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah. He noted, and this will be, I guess we'll kind of close it down with this, because then he kind of moves into something else. But the hens that either didn't pull off a nest or didn't attempt, they kind of group up together and do not associate with hens that had poults until the fall, if
Right.
ever.
Right.
He wrote, if ever.
If ever.
Thought
That's
that was
wild. I mean, I knew that
Yeah.
they have brood flocks and broodless flocks,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that they may not ever associate with each other.
Yeah. He did say, also, just a couple of closing thoughts, and I think this is really interesting because we've got this facility now, and we're going to be able to dig in on some of this interesting stuff. But poults can distinguish their own brood hen and their siblings from others, even when they're all in the same larger amalgamated flock. And flock mates form strong social attachments for one another, and they will fight as a group against other groups,
Mhm. Well, I mean, that
even
gets
at
back to
that poult stage.
the Watts work, and apparently it
Yeah,
starts even earlier than the Jake phase.
yeah.
Huh.
This is why they're still with the brood hen, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll close on that note because we're getting up on an hour here.
Yeah. Friends for life, man. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, we try to tie this back to management, but sometimes just understanding the biology of the animal is really cool. And like you said, going back and reading some of this natural history is really fun and enlightening sometimes. There is some management implications though.
Yeah.
The nesting hen being in good nesting cover, not only is that, increasing her concealment, but she apparently knows that.
Mhm.
And it's influencing how fast she decides to flush and get the
Mhm.
hell out.
Yeah. And then the structure of that vegetation around her could also influence whether or not she has to walk a long distance to the nest or she can just kind of fly in and fly out and prevent leaving that
I
scent
wasn't
trail.
even thinking about it from the scent trail standpoint.
Yeah.
When you said that earlier, it dawned on me when you said at that time.
Yeah.
I was thinking about her, leaving the nest or coming and
Yeah.
having mid-story hardwoods. It won't let her do that real well.
Yeah.
And you were saying if she can't and she has to walk away,
That's right.
she's leaving a scent trail.
That's right. So it
And now
makes
the study that we've got in review makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense, doesn't it?
so having the right structure of vegetation allows her to not deposit odor and to get out of there faster. The wrong vegetation makes her leave a scent trail so she's easier to find, and when she is found, she's less capable of escaping.
Gosh.
That is why this natural history stuff is important. It's worth reading,
Stuff is coming
and it's
together.
worth doing and understanding it too, because it
Yes.
informs management.
Well, I think, there's no question that that's true. And I think we should leave with this note. I mean, I'm kind of mind blown right now, and a lot of
I
things
could
that we're
tell you're
working
you're
on,
reeling.
are starting to make a lot of sense, which are all new things. But we're not talking about just yet because they're in the publication process currently. But this is a good point to make. We need natural history like this to really understand the biology of the animals, how they're behaving, and that can help you build expectations or even explain other observations like, why they're successful in some conditions or why this, managing habitat in this way might make them more successful. But also want to reiterate that there's kind of three parts to this that I think are personally really important. One, you've got the observations, just trying to learn as much as you can, that natural history. Two is more of a correlative style of methodology where we tag a bunch of hens and then go see what they do and whether or not they're successful and try to attach that to whatever the context is. And then three is the experimental part. And I think that is the part that we've undervalued. And even like when we put the video up recently about the Poult facility and we're talking about the
Yeah.
experimental design, based on the comments and messages that we got about it, a lot of people don't understand why we would want to do things experimentally,
Yeah.
which we're trying to. So I think intuitively, those other things make a lot of sense for a lot of people. And maybe that was they got to watch us in real time come together on why having those both would be really important, but the experimental part is also really important.
I think we're almost, to the point where that's the next frontier. We've done almost all the observational work we can do. So, we're kind of
Yeah,
getting to that
and
point.
correlational as well.
Yeah, where how much are we going to learn by, just GPSing hens on a site and seeing where they go and what they do. Like I'm not
Yeah,
undervaluing that. There still are situations where that provides valuable data. And if a state is still in a position where it needs vital rates to inform
yeah.
population models, then 100% they should be doing that.
Well, look at Florida. Like, we're talking about that nesting stuff, or we had that recent roosting episode.
Right.
We didn't talk about Osceolas. You
Yeah.
know why?
Because there's nothing on it.
There's not one.
Yeah.
There's no study.
Yeah.
So, and if there is, I can't find it.
Yeah. It's so obscure. It's buried somewhere, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But, that's the point. Like, we are still in that stage in this case
Yeah.
with Osceolas, and maybe they're the same as all the other turkeys, but maybe they're
Yeah.
not. They're definitely in a different situation from an environmental standpoint.
Yeah.
So,
But I think we're at a point where if we're trying to ascertain the effect of this on that, that type of study, then we're at the point where we start needing to using manipulative
yeah,
experiments on
right.
this, you know?
So I guess I was trying to make the point with Osceolas, like we've never had a annual hen survival estimate
Yeah,
in the Osceola range.
right.
So we're working on getting that so we can do the population modeling that you're talking about.
Sure.
But we've got lots of observations of that
Yeah,
across the eastern and other subspecies. In fact, I'm pretty sure we have 51 of them.
yeah,
So, that we are kind of at that stage, I think, where we're, trying to experimentally change things and see how it affects hen survival so we can get at the mechanisms and what we can do. Like, that's
mm,
where the experimental stuff really comes into play for me, is it tells you mechanistically what's happening, and it also is giving you really strong insight in what you can do about it.
mhm,
So when you go out and change all the habitat quality and you see hen survival double, I'm just making stuff up, but let's just assume that happened. Now we know, oh, if we go out and do this stuff to the landscape, we should expect that vital rate to double.
right.
Right? It's giving you a mechanism of what's causing hen survival to improve, and that what is causing it is something you can implement in the management strategy. And I
That's
think
right.
that's important. And it goes above and beyond just looking at the variation and selection in a population.
Yeah,
Like, this hen selected this, and
yeah,
that hen selected that, and this one was better than that one, so this is what we should do. That doesn't tell you necessarily that you need to just make a bunch more of whatever that is on the
yeah,
landscape.
yeah, that's right, and then, a lot of people get confused too and think, well, if we're trying to investigate the effect of this factor on turkeys, then why can't we just study one property where it's this way and another property where it's the other way. Well, those aren't the only things that differ between those two
Yep.
properties, right? There's a whole host
Yeah.
of other things that differ between those two properties. And so while your hypothesis may be supported by the difference between those two, you can't say that there's cause and effect there because
Right.
that was not the only factor that differed between those two.
You would at a minimum need to have lots of replicates.
Yeah, and that's the problem is a lot of times on that scale, you're just doing one property versus the other. So it's an N of one in one
Yeah.
condition and an
It's
N
just
of
a
one on the other.
comparison.
It's not a replicated study.
Right. So you don't really know what factor is responsible for the difference that you observe. So yeah, if you can start to get replication, then you start to approach that causation, but really you need a manipulative framework that is strong
Preferably
in
with
establishing causation.
and especially with turkeys, if it has any aspect of reproduction involved in it, that
It's got to
becomes
be long term.
increasingly important. It's got to be long term, and you also have to have controls because it's so cyclical and variable on an annual
Yeah.
basis that you have to be able to have a reference group to compare to.
Yeah, you can't just have before after.
So we've gone from natural history now into talking about, the more
Experimental design again.
nuanced
I think
aspects of experimental
yeah.
design. I think we're probably done here.
I think we need to turn this thing
Yeah.
off. Hey, I'm going to close it with Lovett Swing Bone.
There he is.
Yes, so really great stuff. I always love going back and reading. We should pick some other historical research, especially people like this.
Well, we've even had some
'cause there's a
listeners
bunch-
suggest that we do like a turkey science book club kind of thing, and
Yeah.
and read books on some periodic basis and go over them on the show. I think that would be cool. It's just
Yeah,
trying to plan all that and coordinate it is tough with our day job. So,
yeah.
but we'll keep it in
No,
mind.
I agree. But I would definitely highly recommend the Book of the Wild Turkey written by Lovett Williams, and this one pretty cool. It's also signed
Of course it is.
April 12th, 1982. So really cool stuff. Hope y'all enjoyed this. I know it was a little more on the natural history side and a little less scientific, maybe a little less management implication, but really interesting stuff about this bird that we really love.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody for all the support. See you next time.
Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.